Our firm just completed a housing needs assessment for the city of Woodland Park, Colorado. We titled this study Down to Earth, Managing Housing Costs and Availability in Woodland Park 2023 to 2040. We presented these same findings during an official work session to Woodland Park's City Council in March 2024. It is important to stress that these are independent findings as housing analysis professionals. It's up to the city staff and elected officials to determine whether to implement these recommendations. First, let me introduce you to the community. As the largest city in Teller County, Woodland Park is nestled at the foot of Pikes Peak and itself sits at 8,400 feet in elevation. Even for us Idahoans, that takes a minute to adjust to. The city's population has never exceeded 10,000 people, though it has seen more growth in the last 6 years, particularly boosted by remote workers during the pandemic. Just a 25-minute drive from Colorado Springs, the pressures from that extremely high growth market have trickled into Woodland Park. The city is also home to Andrew Wommack Ministries and Charis Bible College, which is one of the largest landowners and contributors to recent population expansion. As you might expect, Woodland Park is struggling with housing affordability. It requires a staggering 5 times an average resident's annual income to purchase an average price home in the city. That's why just 29% of households in the city could afford a home at current prices and interest rates. Those who have managed to find a rental in Woodland Park are paying a fine price as well, with 60% of renter households fitting the federal government's definition of cost burdened. Typically, when doing this type of study, we assess future housing needs based on in-migration, population growth, and job creation trends. In other words, we focus on drivers of demand. We did all of that in this case, but we also really dialed in on supply side issues, of which Woodland Park has several. At this point, a short economics lesson is in order. The figure we show here portrays standard supply and demand curves, which are typically used to explain markets for any type of product or service. In this case, the market being portrayed is housing units in Woodland Park. Without any market interference, the market will result in a certain number of housing units at a certain average price. If there is a shortage or constraint on supply, we move the supply curve up and to the left. Now notice what happened to cost in production. That's right, kids. The number of units goes down and costs go up. Hence is the case with housing in Woodland Park. So what exactly are these supply constraints? Well, like many towns in Colorado, Woodland Park has water capacity constraints. This information is not new to the city. The Public Works Department tracks water availability and usage trends on an annual basis and actually caps the number of residential building permits annually based on these factors. That said, our team did some deeper analysis on their data and found that the city can serve a larger capacity of people than its internal analysis indicated. The city's current estimated population is 7,900. Prior estimates of its maximum population capacity were in the range of 12,600 and 13,660. The number we arrived at, in our opinion, is closer to 16,400. Though this is seemingly good news for the city's ability to facilitate economic growth, there is one other supply factor to consider. Within the city's current boundaries are just over 4,100 acres, of which 3,300 are zoned for residential use. So the question is, how many more units could fit within the vacant residentially zoned parcels in the city? Enter the City of Woodland Park's zoning code, which stipulates what units can be built where, along with density, size, and height requirements. If we assume maximum density, or the highest number of allowable units on each parcel, we arrive at a maximum total population of 11,109. That's right, folks. Though public policy stress for the past decade has been solely on the topic of water, land availability and zoning are actually more of a limitation on growth than water. Going back to the chart we started with, land use policies are unquestionably contributing to affordability challenges. And now for the good news. You can't change the water situation, but you can change the zoning situation. Now that you know about housing supply, let's come back to our housing needs forecast. We found that between 2023 and 2040, the community is going to need somewhere between 350 and 615 new housing units. That range is dependent upon policies adopted by the city that would lead down a status quo path or a moderate density path. This point is worth pausing on for the sake of policy wonks out there. Oftentimes, we think housing forecasts assume an unrealistically dense future for the context of a given city. We don't do that. We did not create a study that would cram density upon a community that does not want it. Currently, 79% of dwellings in Woodland Park are single family, and regardless of our growth scenario, the proportion by 2040 would not drop below 74% of overall housing stock. In other words, it would remain a predominantly single family community. We'll just touch on one other point before getting to our recommendations, because it is very relevant to the density point. Woodland Park has historically been known as a place that is suspicious of growth, in a community that resists denser housing types such as apartments. But we conducted a community survey that achieved a 4.8% response rate, making it relevant at the 95% confidence interval. Firstly, we found that 56% of respondents actually want to see more housing development of some type or another. Secondly, not all types of dense housing are off of the table for residents. So just 15% of survey respondents were amenable to apartments, but housing types like condos, townhomes, duplexes, cottage neighborhoods, and most of all, accessory dwelling units were a different story. These findings present a range of possibilities for city leaders to consider among the middle density housing options. And now, without further ado, let's talk recommendations. Our study provided 14 recommendations organized according to zoning-related, resource management-related, and short-term rentals. These are shown briefly here and in more detail in our report. Let's just touch on 2 of these here. First, as surprising as it may seem, there is no location in Woodland Park where a developer can simply build apartments. Though there are 2 multifamily zoning districts, developers' ability to build in these areas is conditional on approval of the Planning Commission and the things that they would require out of those meetings. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I have literally never seen such a restrictive policy in any community in the United States. We recommend that this policy is eliminated. Secondly, as we discussed, the accessory dwelling unit or ADU concept is fairly popular among residents in Woodland Park. For those unfamiliar with this idea, ADUs are secondary dwelling units that share the same property as the primary unit. Depending on the setting, these can be detached, such as a garage or carriage house, or attached, such as a basement or attic with a separate entrance. But when one reviews Woodland Park's zoning code, ADUs are bound up by so many rules and regulations that actually implementing them is quite challenging. These policies run the gamut from size and headcount limitations, parking restrictions, and an owner occupancy requirement. Alteration of some or all of these should be on the table if the city really wants to diversify its housing stock. We had plenty more to say on these topics, but that's all for this video. If you'd like to learn more about our company or our other studies, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also read the entire Woodland Park study and many others at www.points-consulting.com. Thank you for tuning in.